My name is David Welch. I'm at Brothers Tech Center today, like I am every single Tuesday for you. Today, I've got Sean's 1976 pickup. I'm going to take this long bed and turn it into a short bed using our conversion kit that's nice and easy to use, paint by number style, no math, no measuring, no BS. Stay tuned. I'm going to gather some of my tools and I'm going to get started on this. Be right back. So let's take a look at what comes with our kit. First, you're looking at this template right here, and you can see what I mean by paint by numbers, if you will. You got 1, you got 2. That's where we're going to be drilling all of our holes. These serrations right here, that's where we're going to be cutting. So we don't have to do any measuring, no math, any of that kind of stuff. This right here is the C channel that's going to be going behind your frame to strengthen it up. And then this is all the nuts and bolts that are necessary to bolt everything together. You'll be getting a new brake line for your shortened situation, and we've got a solution for your emergency brake cables also. Now let's take a look at the few things you're going to need on your end. You're going to need at least 4 jack stands. Maybe in some instances you might need up to 8 if you've got it really slammed or some odd tilt in your truck or something. You're going to need a lot of cutting wheels. Now, I like to use the die grinder myself. I just find it cleaner and more concise, but you can use a Sawzall, but whatever you use, make sure you've got enough cutting wheels because you're going to need them. You're also going to need to get quite a bit of 1/8" drill bits. I like to drill a pilot hole on all of the holes so I know they're going exactly where I want them. And you're going to need a handful of these guys right here. You're also going to need 7/16 drill bits, and you're going to need quite a few of those too because we are drilling quite a few holes. After that, a drill and basic hand tools and you're all set. So you don't need anything special. You can do this at home. I'm going to show you how. Come along. First thing we're going to need to do is take the bed off. So a couple of days ahead of time, I'll shoot some oil on there, on all the bolts, and make sure they're getting lubed up a little bit. And I'm going to climb underneath. I don't like to use power tools because it can strip out your carriage bolts. I'll show you that in just a bit. You're going to have to disconnect your electrical. There's always ground straps going from the bed to the frame. And then there's generally other odd things that people might have done with exhaust hangers and miscellaneous things like that. So look out for all that stuff too. I'm going to climb up underneath here, get things unbolted, and I'll show you what comes next in just a bit. Now everything that's behind the cab and in front of our spring perches right here, that's all going to need to come out and be cleaned up. So we can't have weird little nuts holding these things on. So there's these clips that are holding the wires on from the inside. You've got this exhaust bracket right here that will have to take these rivets off. You've got your emergency brake lines. I'll need to disconnect my exhaust, obviously. I'll take out my drive shaft. The gas tank will need to come out. And then little things like this right here holding onto the brake line, those will need to come out. If it's really rusty and cruddy and a couple of different paint jobs and stuff, get all of that off too. We want this as nice and clean as possible so that our templates will fit up on there really nice and tight. So give me a little bit of time to get this out of the way. I'll get my templates on there and we'll see what's next. So everything is ready for our templates to go on. I just want to give you a couple helpful handy hints. Now on the rivets, when I take these off, I like to grind them off. I don't like to use those chisel hammers because I think it's a bit rude. If you grind them off, it's a little bit nicer and neater. When you're taking off your drive shaft, make sure that the yoke is protected and doesn't get scratched up or anything, because then you'll get leaks coming out of your transmission seal in the rear. Also put a glove on the transmission rear seal so that you don't get any garbage up in there. With all the cutting and everything we're going to be doing, there is a great potential for that. Now here on the end, if these U-joint caps come off, the little rollers in there will bounce out. You'll never find them. You'll never get them to back in. So make sure that you tape the end of this so they don't come off. When you're taking your gas tank out, make sure that you put a board underneath it so that the jack doesn't punch a little bit of a dent in there. And when you're taking them off, get all your bolts off the bottom. I like to do 3 bolts on one side, 3 bolts on the other side, get it basically ready. Take out the last 2 bolts, you bring it on down, and then we can go ahead and slip it out this way. Now what I'm going to be doing is getting ready to be doing some cutting and stuff. So I got to make sure that my rear glass is protected. If you had a really nice paint job, you're going to want to cover this entire thing, because the grind, the little burrs that come off when you're grinding, if they hit paint, they'll burn right into it, and they'll burn right into your glass too. So make sure it's protected. We got to make sure that our lines for the fuel are plugged up, or we're going to go boom. So we just put a big screw into that, and then we're all fine on that. I'll double check some other things just to be sure we don't have any leaks going. I'll clean this up a little bit, and then we're getting ready to cut. So stay tuned. Next, we're going to get jack stands. We're going to put 2 right underneath the cab mount perches right here. And then we're going to take 2 and we're going to put 1 right here underneath the spring perch, and then 1 right over here. Now the reason that we're doing this is that we don't want any tension on the frame. So if I didn't have any jack stands right here in the front, when I cut the frame, it'd just go bonk down. If I don't have any in the back, same thing, it'll just bonk down. So when I'm doing that final cut, I don't want any tension anywhere. I want it just nice and even static. So what I was able to do on the front one here, or the one on the right side, is I didn't need any spacers or anything, but on the left side I needed just a little bit of a spacer. So I just make them out of little pieces of metal, little pieces of wood, or cardboard, just depending on what I need to just get the right amount of support, but not pushing up and not letting down. On this side over here, I can just take this jack stand and it just fits right up underneath this perch right here, nice and neat. So you can see that I didn't have to jack the frame up in order to put that in there, and everything's nice and stable. Now I can go ahead and put my templates on, and when I cut, I won't get any surprises. So my frame's all nice and clean, and I'm ready to put my template on. When I do, I'm going to put it on a bit of an angle like this, and I'll slide it forward and I'll bottom off, if you will, on these rivets right here. Then I'll just simply slide it on like this. I'm going to use a punch, and it's going to help me line up this number 1 I have in the center to a number 1 hole that is already in the frame. I'll take my 3/8 hardware and I'll go ahead and I'll bolt that on. And the reason we're bolting this on is because we don't want it to shift around on us when we're cutting up any of the lines here. So with this bolted on, next what I'll do is go to my other number 1s. This one right here and this one right here. Now some frames might already have those holes in them, some frames may not. If they don't, I'll just simply take a 1/8 inch drill bit, put it right in the pilot hole that's in the template, and drill through the frame. Then I'll take a 7/16 drill bit, drill through those. I'll bolt up both with 7/16 hardware. Now I don't have to worry about this going anywhere after it's all bolted up. Now let's say, for instance, none of the number 1 holes are in your frame. Not a big deal. All you got to do is make sure that the template is butted up against the 2 rivets right here. Then you'll drill the number 1 hole, bolt it, number 1 hole, bolt it, number 1 hole, bolt it, and you're all good to go. Now I can go ahead and start going to step number 2. Give me a second to get these bolted up, and I'll show you what step number 2 is. Next step, number 2. So what we're going to be doing is taking an 1/8 inch drill bit, and we're going to chase out every single one of these holes right here. You've got top and bottom, so don't forget those 2. You're going to do the front and the back, and then after they're all drilled out with the 1/8 inch, you're going to come back with your 7/16. Now you might say to yourself, Dave, I don't want to drill through with the 1/8 inch. But you want to, because we have to make sure that this is going totally straight through. When you're drilling, you got to make sure that when you're applying your pressure, you're not having the drill bit tilt up to the side, down, or anything like that, because then your holes won't line up. We want our holes to line up perfectly so we can bolt this up and be nice and secure. So get everything drilled out nice and straight, and then I'll show you what comes next. All right, now I'm getting ready to cut my template out. What I'm going to be doing is just following these lines right here. I'll be cutting the bottom first because it's a little bit more difficult to get underneath there and everything. So cut this off first and then go ahead and come on up. We'll get the front cut, and then we'll just simply move the frame back, and then I'll go ahead and I'll cut this off. And it's just easier to just get one side done and then move it back and then cut this instead of doing everybody together all at the same time. So once again, you could use a Sawzall on this, but I like these better. Okay. Everything's all cut up. Now I just have to do is take off the template from the front and back of the frame here. And then on the middle piece, we're still going to be using this. You can see here it says bumper. It's got these 1/8 inch pilot holes here, and it has the hole here. So this is going to tell us how much to cut off the end of the frame and where to drill our holes to bolt everything back on again. And then we'll go ahead and we'll put in our channels right here next. So give me a few minutes to set up some of my hardware and I'll start bolting everybody together. Okay, so we're going to be welding up these seams after we get everything bolted together. In order to get a good weld, you need a clean weld. In order to get a clean weld, you need clean metal. So I'm just going to be grinding off a bit of the edge here. I'll do a little bit of a 45 on the end, and on the inside I'm going to be cleaning it up too because I don't want any of the burrs from the drill to hang me up, and I want to get all the old paint and grease and grime out of there so my C-channel fits up there nice. Also, I'll be painting the inside of the frame where the C-channel bolts on and the C-channel too, so I can keep it rust at bay as long as possible. So our C-channels are all ready to go in. Now I want you to notice that this has a notch on one side but doesn't have a notch on the other side. The notch is to make room for these rivets right here on the cab mount. So you'll know this one's for the left side and you know this one here's for the right side. Now when I'm putting these in, they're generally gonna fit really snug. Some snugger, some maybe not. And the reason is that when you're driving over the years, all the torquing that the frame's doing, maybe people jacking it up wrong or too much weight, that kind of thing. So sometimes you can put it into one side of the frame and then just slide it into the other side of the frame. This one's a really nice truck and they're in really nice shape and it's pretty firm in there. So I'm putting the frames together and I'm going to go ahead and put this in at the same time because it's so tight of a fit. And when I'm doing that, I don't want to take the hammer and hammer right on it. So I've got a block of wood, or you can use a rubber mallet to help encourage it to go in. I'll also get a punch, and then that'll help me line up my holes. Now also when you're doing this, of course it's going to be better if your frame is as straight as possible. So you might have to do some readjustments after you cut to get everything to line up a little bit better. Take the time to do that. It'll just make it easier for you. So this frame right here, I can see my left side is lining up a little bit quicker and easier. I'm going to go ahead and get that side started. Then I'll come back over and do this other side. I've got my hardware all set up. So let's get bolting. Okay, so I'm all bolted up, but I'm not tightened up just yet. And what I've done is I've used a punch like this, my hammer, miscellaneous things like that, and work all of my bolts in. Now you don't want to waller out. You don't want to make any of the holes larger. If everything was drilled in the right spot, everything should be perfect. Some of them might be difficult to get in, but just work with it. Don't waller out the holes, because then you can mess up how straight the frame's going to be or not. So take your time, get them all in, and when you're tightening them up, don't just grab one and tighten it all the way down. You want to snug them up just a little bit, and then you want to check to make sure that the frame is straight, because maybe where you have your jacks or something, it's putting undue pressure or whatever. So get yourself a level and make sure that it's looking nice and straight on top, on bottom, on your sides. And you're also going to be looking at visuals, like you can see your line right here. If you cut that nice and straight, then this should look nice and straight. If you're getting a condition where your frame is like this, then you're going to want to loosen up your bolts, put a little bit of weight on them, get them down, get them straight. If it's sucking in like that, then you just loosen them up, put a jack underneath, get it nice and straight, and then tighten them up. And when you're tightening them up, it's kind of like when you're doing your intake manifolds. You don't want to just torque one. You snug everybody down, and then you get everybody tight. I'll double check it one last time, and then I'll weld this up. I'll show you how to do that too in just a minute, so stay tuned. So now I can take up my jack stands if I want, and everything's double checked. I'm ready to weld this up. When we use the paint on this, it is a specific paint that is for welding, so make sure that when you get that paint and paint it up, it is specifically for welding. Otherwise, it'll give you a problem when you're trying to weld. You know, you'll notice we got a little bit of a gap right here. A lot of times you might think, well, I want a strong weld, I'm going to butt my metal right up against it. But the problem with that, if the weld does not permeate through all the metal and you grind off the edge, then you're not going to have a strong weld. So we need a little bit of a gap right there. And I generally put a little bit of a 45-degree angle on the metal too, so that I make sure that I've got a really good permeable weld. Now, if you don't have a welder, not a big deal. This is going to be strong enough to where you could put your drive shaft back in your miscellaneous things and drive it on down to your buddy's shop or what have you. Put it on a trailer if you want. You're not going to be doing 600 horsepower burnouts, and but just drive it cautiously, double check it before you weld it. Now, when I'm welding it, I like to do the bottom first, because if you do all the rest of this, you'll have a bunch of slag and everything down here that you'll have to lay in when you're welding the rest. So do your bottom first, and then start from your top and go on down. So we'll be using the rest of this template right here. I'll cut along the dotted line, if you will, and this is going to be our template to put on the rear to see where to drill the holes and how much to cut off. But before I do that, I want to take this brace, go ahead and grind off the rivets, and then go ahead and move it forward. So let me get this out, and then I'll show you how to do that. All right, I've simply cut my template apart, and I'm going to put it right here like this. I'll make sure it's nice and flat on the end, and then I'll go ahead and mark where I need to cut. Now, sometimes the frames are going to be pretty old and ugly and things, and so different helpful handy hints on that is you can take a little bit of paint and paint it right where you're going to be going, put it on, and then you can get a scribe and really make a good mark on it, and that'll make it easier too. So you got a couple of different ways to mark it. I'm going to go ahead and cut this off both sides, then I'm going to come back and show you how to use the rest of this. So we're still going to be using our template here. Next, we're going to be using our marks here for the bumper holes. and all we're going to be doing is putting this right up inside. The reason this has this slot right here is because more than likely you'll have some rivets be in your way. They may or may not. It depends on how long the springs are where this perch sits, but in this case it's going to be right there. I'm going to make sure that I'm even with my edge right here, and then I'm using a punch right here that's specifically for marking out these holes. And then after I get these marked, I'll still drill these out with an 1/8 inch hole, and then I'll come back with a 1/2 inch hole, because these are pretty big bolts that bolt your bumpers on. Now we've got this one last hole right here, and what's going to happen is we're going to set this right on the edge, and we're lining up with the side here and the side here, and then we can go ahead and mark this hole out. Now in this case, this hole kind of lines up already on another hole where we took our rivets out. So I'll do that on both sides, get everything marked up, and I'll drill some holes, and I'll be right back in 2 and 2. Got all my holes drilled in the top for the bed, side for the bumpers, grinded it down a little bit just to get any of the burrs off so I don't get cut up in the future. This is all basically done for you now. Now I can go ahead and I can put my brace back in. Now on this particular truck, when I put this brace back in, this right here is going to bump into this rivet right here. Yours may or may not. Again, this is in relation to the length of the spring where this perch will be. So it may or may not be in your way. If it is in your way, what you can do is just enlarge the hole so that this just fits right over the head of the rivet there. I suppose if you really wanted to get crazy, you could go ahead and grind it off and put a bolt in there if you wanted. But now I can go ahead and put this in here, and I can use the rest of my hardware to bolt everything up. Here's where we'll be using our 3/8 inch nuts and bolts. And so they're just going to go right in like that. 2 on the top and the 1 on the bottom right here. Don't forget it's washer. Then I'll go another washer, then the lock washer, then the nut. I like to use washers on both sides so that I really get a good attachment to everybody. So I'm going to bolt this up the rest of the way, and then I'll see what I want to do next. All right, so that's basically it for your frame. You're basically got a short bed truck now. Now what we're going to be doing is putting everything back together. So what I'll be doing is my brake lines. Sometimes if you have gas tanks in the back, you're going to do your fuel lines. I'll run my electrical back. I'll go ahead and get my emergency brake line solution set up all too. And then I'll go ahead and get my gas tank in. I like to do it last because it's kind of in the way when you're crawling around on the ground putting all these things back in. Now your brake line right here, you can see it's bent up like this, and that's so that we can ship it in a smaller box to save some money. So when I'm going to be straightening this back out, I'll simply do something like this. So now I should be ready to go. I'll figure out which way it goes. I might have some minor little twists here or there, but it's basically all set up for you. So let me get all this stuff in, and then I'll show you what I'm going to be doing on the gas tank. So my electrical is run, and I'm not going to cut it, and I'm just going to loop it, zip tie it, and it's good. My brake line's run, my emergency brake solution's all set up, so now it's time for the gas tank. So if you got a gas tank in the back, then no big deal. You just, shorten your line, hook it back up. If you have the sides tanks like this truck did, then you're going to need to buy a new, shorter gas tank to fit in there. And when I'm putting these on, I'm just going to loosely put this bracket here on, and then you're going to notice this right here. So if I take this and I tighten it all the way down, I won't be able to shift around the brackets, and I need to be able to do that in order to line it up to the holes and get my bolts in. So I'm going to leave this just snug, and I'll tighten it up later. But when I tighten it up, it's going to go through this hole right here. And this hole's not large enough now, so I'll use a step drill and I'll drill that hole out. I like to use these. These are really nice. I use them on all the holes in the back and everything like that. So if you don't have one of these, check them out. They're pretty inexpensive. I'm going to drill that hole out, and then I'm going to remove these 4 bolts here, 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom, and that is where the bracket will go right up onto. So I'll get all this all set up. I'll get a board, I'll put it underneath the gas tank so I don't dent it in the bottom. I'll just go ahead and jack it up. I'll get all my bolts lined up. Then after everybody is good and secure, then I can go ahead and tighten these straps the rest of the way and attach my lines. Get new clamps on there. When you're putting your clamps on, imagine how it's going to be when it's complete so it's facing the right way. You want to be able to get your screwdriver on there in order to be able to tighten it up. So let me get this all set and I'll be right back. Okay, we've double checked everything, and the last thing I did was install the drive shaft. Now we've taken 14 inches out of the drive shaft just like we took 14 inches out of the frame. When you do that, make sure you take it to a good driveline shop. Don't try to do it at home, because if you get it off, you'll get really wild vibrations that'll be really irritating. The drive shaft will shorten and it'll be balanced at the shop, so you'll get a nice ride out of it. In between filming and stuff, I've already shortened up the bed sides. We've got a video for you on that. If you check out our YouTube channel and subscribe, it's going to make it a lot easier for you to find. So we are getting ready to put our bed back on. I'm going to go look for a couple of guys to give me a hand. You stay tuned, and we're going to take a look at the finished product. So if you got a long bed and you want a short bed, you can have one. All you got to do is get Brothers Kit. Doesn't take any math, doesn't take any measurement, doesn't take that much thinking really even. This took me about 8 or 10 hours to do, and just the frame, of course. Your bed sides will take a bit more. And don't forget to subscribe, because we've got that video for you. And don't forget to subscribe, because we're not done with Sean's truck just yet. I'm going to put in a 1-piece window, and maybe I'll think of something else for you too. So subscribe. Instagram, Facebook, next Tuesday, baby.